Thank you, Wolfgang, Chris, and Brigitte for that introduction. Before I start this evening, I would just like to acknowledge, by way of another story again, of the local Indigenous people of the Eora Nation. Last time I spoke, I spoke of Sydney as the place of the Yandalora, known in the Dharawal language as the city or the place of peace, believe it or not. And this came about because the various peoples were not understanding each other, and there were some mischievous beings that managed to dress themselves up as human beings and caused dissent amongst the people. And so they chose a warrior, the lyrebird, who became the peacekeeper. And the lyrebird was chosen because the lyrebird can speak all the languages. And 7 warriors of peace were chosen to help the lyrebird to go amongst the people to bring about understanding between them. And the wiri, who were the beings who caused mischief and disharmony between peoples, at first thought, oh, well, we just have to hang around. No one's going to actually manage to create harmony and create this great nation, the Eora nation, in this Yandalora, this place of peace. But they did. And so the wiri started to get a little bit agitated and started to try to do away with the 7, we're going to be working with this number tonight, 7 peace warriors with the peacekeeper. So the wiri decided that they would get rid of these warriors of peace themselves and the peacekeeper. And so they knew that when anyone came into the Yandalora, they had to put their weapons down and they had to come in and sit around fires and be in community and build understanding between each other. So they snuck in and hid themselves, waiting for the peacekeeper and the 7 warriors of peace to return. And while they were returning, they put down their weapons. The great spirit of the land felt the disharmony return when the wiri came into the Yandalora and thought, we need to deal with these beings, we need to transform them once and for all. And so this great spirit went to the 7 peace warriors and the peacekeeper and said, I have a plan. He said to the lyrebird, go into the forest and build a fire and sit there and make sure there's lots of sparks to attract the wiri. And to the 7 warriors of peace, he turned them into trees, eucalyptus trees. And then the wiri came and they dressed themselves up like the lyrebird's mother, and they woke him up. And as he woke up the peacekeeper, the great spirit transformed these 7 trees back into the warriors of peace, and they threw the wiri into the fire, who were then transformed back into the land of spirit. And in reward for this great deed, to remove this or to transform these beings of mischief, they were turned into the 7 types of eucalyptus trees. Now, we all know botanically there's many different kinds of eucalyptus trees, but in the Dharawal people and the people of Sydney, we recognise 7 types of eucalyptus trees distinguished by their bark. So we have stringy bark eucalypts, we have rough bark eucalypts, we have ribbon bark, mottled or spotted bark, scaly barks or the box eucalypts, smooth bark, and iron bark eucalypts. So when you're walking around Sydney and you see these different kinds of eucalypts, you know that they bring about peace in this land of Yandalora. And the lyrebird was then given the possibility or transformed into the rough-barked Angophora. Now, if people don't know what the Angophora is, I suggest you take a walk around and take a look. The what? Yeah. But they got slightly different leaves and you can see them around Sydney. So this is the story. So by way of introducing this evening, I thought I would just give us another bit of insight into the dreaming stories of our city that we live in. So tonight, I am going to try and talk about some ideas I've had, and I'm going to offer them as points for consideration rather than this is how it is. And so through the evening, John, if you can put the blackboard up, I'm going to take 5 steps through this talk this evening. The first, I'm going to introduce briefly, because I think we all know how Steiner talks about the Rose Cross meditation. It's the one meditation where he gives the most detail about how to go about doing it, in especially occult science and in one of his books about mysticism. Then we will go to the 4th step, which is about the mystical or the inner work done in the Rose Cross meditation, which we may not really be too familiar with. And then out of that inner work, I'm going to be talking about these centers of attraction. It's something that Rudolf Steiner spoke about. I put in the title of this lecture, Sanctuaries of Attraction. Steiner actually uses centers of attraction, Anziehungszentren. So I've sort of elaborated that a little bit into being a sanctuary of attraction. And then we will talk about the consequences of that work or the effects of that work in relationship to the 4-petaled lotus flower in knowledge of the higher worlds, and how that has a reflection in the work that we do in the post-life experience, how that can possibly come together. So there's a few, 3 or 4 streams of ideas of Steiner that I've sort of laid over each other for us to be able to work with. And I'll come back to this diagram here, which is the diagram that Rudolf Steiner gave in an early lecture cycle on the pictures of the Book of the Apocalypse. And he calls this diagram of the centered pointed star with these eyes at each of the points, the Lamb of God, or an image for the ego of the human being, or the I am of the ego to be able to enter in. So let's start. We've got a bit of a journey to go with this. I've got more notes tonight than usual. So what were the 5 steps given in the Rose Cross meditation? There are 5 phases of the Rose Cross meditation that Rudolf Steiner gives. So the first step is for us to look at a rose or a green plant, but especially the rose, and to feel how it is pure and chaste, but rooted to one place. And in looking at that, we can feel a certain sense of privilege as a human being, because we're not rooted to one place. We can go about on 2 feet and move around, unlike the plant. And there's certain feelings he asks us to develop in relationship to that. And one of them is to realize that because of this freedom to walk around, the passions have been placed into our blood system. So to get a real sense of gravity around that, but also a deep sense of responsibility to transform the blood. And the image for the transformation of that blood is where the green petals of the rose transform into the red petals of the rose plant into that of the flower. And this transformation of the green to the pure red of the petals is an image for us of the work that can be done, where we realize that in the weight of our blood, in the impurities and the passions that are inscribed into our blood, can be transformed into a more pure or noble soul. And that gives us a certain sense of joy, a certain sense of bliss, and he goes into some detail about what kinds of feelings we need to develop while we are observing nature in this way. That's not yet the meditation. This is what he calls the contemplation of nature and the building of the symbol. So that's the second step that we get to with this. This is all in occult science. We take the second step where we then build the symbol of this. So, and this is an important aspect in his lecture on what is mysticism. He says that a modern or a spiritual scientific form of mysticism would be to be able to find a balance between the natural world, the laws of the natural world, and the laws within. We need to build a bridge between the two. We don't want to just drop into a pondering of the feelings within our soul. We need to take something of the outer world into our soul. And so we build out of these images of of the outer world, the black cross, so the wood of nature, as the cross of symbolizing our body that is burdened by the passions in the red blood. But then also place a circle of 7 roses around the cross's cross point, 3 above and 4 below that cross beam. So he says, you know, in that sense, we're using our observation of nature, we're using the feelings we develop in nature to build a symbol that is from the elements of nature but cannot be found in nature. That's the thing. It's lifted out of nature to build this archetypal symbol that represents the work for us. That's step 2 of the Rose Cross meditation. And the third step is to meditate upon that symbol. He then says the meditation starts where we hold that symbol in our mind's eye for as long as possible and imbue that with all the feelings that we had while we were doing the observation and building the symbol. So the feelings are really important for us to enliven this symbol for us out of the feelings that we've had towards being able to ennoble ourselves under the image of the transformation of the rose plant to the rose flower. That's one way of putting it. That's where most of us get to with the Rose Cross meditation, because it's not described any further in knowledge of the higher worlds. Then in the lecture on mysticism, which is in this book, if people want to know that, I've only got the older version, The Metamorphosis of the Soul, Paths of Experience. What's it called now? Transformation of the Soul. In the lecture, I think it's the second lecture. No, I think it's the third lecture. What is mysticism? So in this What is Mysticism lecture in 1910, Rudolf Steiner takes it a step further, and he says at some point we need to then move from this realm of imagination. So we've been working with the capacity of imagination to hold an image of the rose cross with the feelings, and we need to let go that image and move to the level of using inspiration, where we take all the work that we have done to build that symbol, so all the feelings, all that sense of understanding, and let that drop into our soul. That's the step to now the mystical step, is to go within ourselves and feel and work with the work that we did to create that symbol. And it doesn't go into much more detail than that, what that work is. And that's where I'm going to try and unpack some possibilities for us to see what is that inner work. Because at first, it might just be to allow that sense of responsibility. I mean, I did this for many years. You allow that sense of bliss, you allow that sense of responsibility, that endeavor to mature and ennoble my soul, to become a sense of will within ourselves, like an awakening of an ideal within our soul as the inner work of that. That's one level of being able to understand it for sure. Once we've done that, the last step, which we won't necessarily, well, we might get to it a bit tonight, but the last step in the meditation of the Rose Cross is then to move to the realm of intuition, which is how do we then take what is alive within us through that mystical world and relate it again to the physical world around us. So we've moved from the practical world of the plant and the flower into a symbol, into the feelings, and then into the inner work within us. And then once that becomes something, this is the step to the consciousness soul, where we've perceived something, we've brought it into an understanding, and then out of that understanding, we find ways to act in the world together again. So this inner awakened will, this inner awakened feeling that we get from the Rose Cross becomes a source of our ethical life and our moral feeling in a way. But it has to also then be brought back out. So it's for Steiner, the spiritual, scientific, or the anthroposophical form of mysticism is, you know, the world of matter, the world of empirical understanding, brought into the soul, and then brought back out, what arises as knowledge within us, brought back out into relationship to that world again. It can't just remain within ourselves as a sort of an ongoing whirling around in our soul of feeling. That's part of it, but that is the furnace of producing this step out again. So that's an understanding of the Rose Cross meditation. So what is this inner work? So we're going to step 2 here. What is this inner work, this mystical work, this step 4 of the inner work? And that's where I want to try and unpack. I've explained that a little bit already, what it could be. And I'm going to have to jump around a little bit from my very clever dot points there. But what we see happens here, and John, you might bring up this, you get this picture on the right here of the 7-pointed star, is that Rudolf Steiner talks about the 7-pointed star as the Lamb of God. And he puts these 7 eyes on these points. And they are related to, and I've put up here, this is for our ease as observers tonight, that we're looking at it from behind. Normally when we look at it, it's from the front. So this is like imprinted in our bodies this way. This is the right side of the body, and that is the left side of the body. So at the right foot, we have Saturn going up to Sun at the head, Moon at the left foot, and then it goes across to Mars on the right hand or hip, and then up onto the left-hand side of the head, and the right hand with Mercury. On the right-hand side is Jupiter, and then coming down to the left-hand side here is Venus, and back down to Saturn. Now you'll notice that that's the evolutionary cycle. It's the days of the week. It's going through that process, but in a very interesting sequence. I mean, it's going logically in its formation through the days of the week. But what happens is you get around the sun on the left-hand side of the body, the inner planets, so Moon, Venus, and Mercury. And on the right-hand side of the body, the outer planets, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, of the traditional solar system. Now, what we need to understand here, or try to understand, is that in another lecture, so as I said, I'm going to be bringing a few ideas together here, that from the left-hand side of our body, Lucifer is trying to enter into our body. And from the right, Ahriman is trying to enter into our body. And there's actually 3 layers of this. So we have from the left and the right, Lucifer and Ahriman. Lucifer also tries to enter our body from the top of the head, and Ahriman from our feet up. And then from the front and back, Lucifer tries to enter into our body from the front, and Ahriman from the back. And eventually it squeezes into like a cube within the heart realm, where there is the free space of the human being, is where we manage to build a sort of balance to those attempts to work into us. So for example, if we look at the right-hand side of the body, we see Ahriman there, you have the liver. So it's not a symmetry. And on the left-hand side, you have the stomach. It's not in symmetry, whereas the lungs are higher up, they are far more symmetrical. So there's all those sorts of aspects that we can kind of try to understand. Now, when we look at that, my question on this was, is part of the inner work building within the soul these eyes as sanctuaries of attraction to create a way for these higher beings of these planets to help us work in our soul constitutions to balance what Lucifer and Ahriman would have in our soul? I'll say that again. My question was, is this a diagram? Is this a symbol of the Lamb of God, so the I am of the human being, with 7 eyes, which allows the beings of these higher planetary spheres to look into our soul and help us to look at something within ourselves that needs to be brought into balance, that can, in a way, lift the effects of Lucifer and Ahriman in our soul. And how would that work? How would that work? How would these beings actually do that? So when we look within us, I'm going to bring now a third idea to that, which is this place where Steiner talks about, and I'm going to actually read you a couple of paragraphs, which isn't always the nicest thing to do in a lecture, but it's quite important that we understand that. In his lecture cycle on the world of the senses and the world of the spirit, we see, which is given in 1912, also quite early. But I'm going to just read you this, because it starts talking about our opinions and our judgments. So there are opportunities in life where our thoughts and whatever we develop in the way of judgments and opinions are not so harmful for our own reality as they are in everyday existence. In the ordinary, everyday waking condition, good gods have seen to it that our thoughts have not too bad an influence on our own reality. We have withheld from us the power our thoughts might otherwise exercise upon our physical and etheric bodies. And it would really go very hard with us if it were not so. If thoughts were to signify in the world what the thoughts of the gods do in reality signify, then the human being would evoke within inside themselves, with every error in thought, a slight death process. And little by little, we would be quite dried up. And as for an untruth, if with every lie we told, we had to burn up the corresponding bit of our brain, how long would our brain last? Good gods have withheld from our soul the power over our etheric body and the physical body. And this rejuvenation of the physical body and the etheric body happens during sleep. And he goes into that. He says the inflow of forces takes place at night when we sleep. In the night, they flow to us from the universe, coming to us by way of our ego and astral body, the currents that we need to dispel the fatigue in the etheric and the physical body. And there you have, in actual fact, the living connection between the worlds of will and of wisdom and the physical and etheric bodies of the human being. For into these worlds vanish during sleep the astral body and the ego, and they enter into these worlds where we sleep, centers of attraction for substances which have then to flow out of the world of wisdom into the etheric body and out of the world of will into the physical body. So while we're sleeping, there are centers of attraction for these underlying will and wisdom that is carried by the stars and the various planets, and they flow out of these centers, and these centers will become quite important for us because there's a second layer to this and a third layer that we will come to. And that rebuilds our etheric body and our physical body. And he says, he warns, he says, if we shouldn't do this while we are awake. This is where I'm going to kick at the door a little bit, because maybe we should be doing it while we're awake. Because one of the interesting things that Rudolf Steiner always alludes to is that while we have a certain thing that Hannah Arendt might have called the human condition, which is, this is the status quo to protect us, where the spiritual world during sleep build these centers of attraction, we build it with them, where these forces of the planets can then flow in their wisdom and the will into our etheric and physical body. And we are protected because our thinking and our feeling and our willing would do damage if we tried to do that consciously. That is the grace and the blessings of our current situation. At the same time, he's always saying we need to be working on things that prepare the future of humanity. So where are we up to with being able to say, what would I do if I, in my everyday life, started to feel how these centers of attraction can be approached in my day-to-day life, how I can actually enter into some of them in my own experience of myself that can help me prepare to be aware when I enter into the knowledge and the perception of the higher worlds. So there's this dual process of the grace of the gods holding something in place, while at the same time humanity is slowly finding ways to do that in their own way. And so I'm going to suggest a gentle possibility that hopefully, and this is a possibility, I'm not even saying it's correct, I'm saying it has become very meaningful for me to be able to work like this, because what he says is, it is on this account that we have to undergo great pain when we are on the path to knowledge and are making the ascent into higher worlds. If we are in real earnest, it must necessarily bring us great pain. You will find in my book, Knowledge of the Higher Worlds, a description of how the life of the human being by night, the sleeping life, is, so to speak, made use of to help the human being to rise from the world of external reality into higher worlds. When the human being begins from out of the world of imagination to light up his sleep consciousness, so that's where we're hooking in. We're out of our own imagination, we begin to light up our sleep consciousness, and I'm going to add our afterlife consciousness. Then it is important for us to make sure that we ourselves get out of the way. And so shut out of our consciousness all that might cause disturbance to our physical and etheric bodies. No wonder the gods need to help us. It is an absolute necessity in making the ascent into higher worlds to get to know oneself thoroughly and exactly. When we really know ourselves, we cease as a rule to love ourselves. Self-love comes to an end when we begin to have self-knowledge. And this self-love, which is always present in anyone, is an illusion to imagine we do not love ourselves. We love ourselves more than anything else in the world. This self-love must have been overcome if we are able to shut ourselves out of our consciousness. He says, as I am now, I must eliminate myself. So at first he's been talking about how we need to get over our prejudice, our sympathies, and this is a further step of the alone. So he's talked about how we have to attain to self-surrender, and then we have to eliminate ourselves on the path into the spiritual worlds. We must have the possibility at every moment to feel, I must put myself right on one side. For if I do not shut out completely all those things in me that are otherwise I quite like to feel in me, errors, trivialities, prejudices, sympathies, antipathies, if I do not put these right away, then my ascent into higher worlds cannot be made aright. And that's kind of the hook into what I'm going to try and describe as this inner work. When we go into ourselves, does the 7 roses, so this is not the work that I described before, which is the work of, the feeling of the bliss and the responsibility and the awakened will working within me. I want to turn to the possibility of the 7 roses themselves having a function in our inner work. Does each rose actually have a possibility of lighting up for us? And there's one meditation that Rudolf Steiner gives about the rose cross that I would like to read to you. You may know it, you may work with it quite a bit yourself, but the first rose lighting up on the left-hand side of the head. May your warmth warm through me. The second rose lighting up on the right half of the head. May your light shine through me. Third rose on the left hand. May your awakeness stream through me. Fourth rose on the right hand. May your peace pour through me. The fifth rose. May your ray move powerfully through me. And the right foot, may your rising up permeate me. And then with the sun, I am in your sphere. So I'm going to just quickly add the words, not the full words, but you've got left, warmth. The thinking. And over here, we've got light. Over here, where we've got the feeling realm, we've got awakeness. And on the right-hand side, we've got peace. Down here, we have a ray that moves. A ray moves. So I'm not very good at blackboard writing. And down here, we've got a raising up. A raising up that permeates us. So what are these possibilities? Are these possibilities of working something in our thinking, our feeling, and our willing in relationship to this fulcrum, like a balance, like Libra, the scale, Michael, that we have Lucifer and Ahriman. He's named it here, for example, and these words I'm going to put up here are possible, or one word that leads to one-sidedness thoughts of many kinds. So for example, we could put here, what's a really good color? Can you read purple? No, not really, can you? What's a good color? Okay. Just keep going with white? Okay, so opinions. We could say in our thinking, opinions come about when Lucifer pulls us too far out, whereas judgments are when we become too hardened in our own thoughts. How would we find the balance in our thinking, in our understanding? Well, we could say, if I have an eye within my soul, a sanctuary of attraction that allows the warm reason of Mercury to work into my opinions, I might be able to put them aside a little bit. I might be able to transform them. Whereas on the other side of the scale, the light of wisdom of Jupiter might be able to help me bring my judgments into a more sort of understanding, a more sort of understanding side of our thinking. So when understanding works here, we could say the sun forces have created a fulcrum. And when that fulcrum drops further down, through understanding in our feeling, we can develop the fulcrum of compassion. So what would be the sort of archetypal Ahrimanic and Luciferic extremes of our feeling realm? And we could say anger. There is a Steiner lecture on the mission of anger. And over here, the cold side would be cynicism. Is cynicism with a Y? Cynicism. So the coldness of cynicism hardens me in myself, whereas anger takes me out. When the sun drops further down into my feeling, the awakeness of Venus So of love. So the awakeness of love into our anger transforms, we could say the awakeness of why am I angry can transform anger into love. Whereas the peace of Mars, now people might think Mars is not peaceful, but Rudolf Steiner does say that all wars now come from Venus, not from Mars anymore. All war comes from the jealousy of the feminine in our souls. Just FYI. Chew on that one. Mars has been transformed by Buddha. He's very peaceful now. All the peace forces come from Mars. The world has changed. It's changing every day. So peace. So this is the mission of Buddha on Mars, is to transform the warlike nature of Mars into peace. So if we can bring peace into our cynicism, we may be able to raise it through compassion into love. So when understanding drops down into the feeling, we get compassion. And when that drops down into will, we get love. We could say love in action. So what are the extremes in the will? So I would say on the luciferic side, it would be passion, which is, both positive and negative. And on the hardened side, maybe desire. And again, as I say, these are one word that represent every form between there. Yeah, every form between anger and cynicism, maybe even further, because I'll come to that in a moment. So what would transform the passions within us? So the moon forces, the raying, I can't even read my writing, how the ray moves within us, the moon forces. So the moon forces are procreation, the life force of procreation, which is not about making babies. Procreation is also about making babies, but procreation is the possibility of something to renew itself, like every organ can recreate itself within itself. It can renew itself. So if we bring creativity into our passions, we may raise them into art or social graces. Whereas if we bring this, what the Saturn forces are, and allow them to rise within us, and this one might be a little bit more difficult, but Steiner talks about the Saturn forces as being the knowledge of spiritual scientific imaginations, the holder of esoteric knowledge. And if we can bring these Saturnine forces into desire, we could raise our personal desire into what he calls divine desire, or if we call it in the higher forms of the will, the wish for something, the motives and the wish and the intentions for raising that out of the Saturn forces into the world. So this would be an inner work. This would be an inner work for us to be, it's one of the ways to be able to possibly work with the 7 roses in my soul, is to see how they can possibly be help prepare by drawing these forces of the planets through these eyes that are in my ego, in the pattern of my ego, in my body, in the 7-pointed star, towards building capacities to, not be as affected by these hardened sides of my soul, so that I can begin to prepare for perceiving in the spiritual world. So let's go one step further. What might lie beneath, as they say? What lies beneath our thinking, and what lies beneath our feelings? So beneath our opinions and our judgments, what lies beneath our anger and our cynicism, and what lies beneath our passions and desires? Would we need to do that? Why am I angry? Oh, I'm just angry and you just better watch out. Or do I want to go into a certain sense of self-reflection where, as in that quote that I just read, some of that is starting to be pushed aside, being able to be transformed through really understanding the hardened part of my inner double. This is the work of the 4-petaled lotus flower, by the way. When we read in Knowledge of the Higher Worlds, that the work of the 4-petaled lotus flower is to get to know the forms of your own unchanging, hardened shadow. And so that when I perceive this mirror, that's the one exercise. When I perceive the mirror of my inflexible self, built of all these things, through that, the higher self can be born. So the higher self doesn't just come in. The higher self comes in through the transformation of the mirror of this lower self. That's the work of the four-petaled lotus flower. So we need to know what lies beneath. Now, I can go a little bit along this way. If you go to the Goetheanum, there is in the west portal, the red window, the Michael window. And in the bottom left-hand corner, there are these three creatures that are epitomes of our thinking, our feeling, and our willing. And we could say that what lies beneath this would be doubt. Why do you doubt? Or beneath our feeling, possibly an even harder one, is hatred. This is what really kills us, these forces of hatred. And then in the third one, under the will lies fear. Sorry, I'm writing completely sideways. But is it possible that if I start to look at my doubts, so do I really believe in reincarnation? Or is it just a working theory at this point, and possibly I don't really believe in it? Like, is it an existential knowledge for you? Or is they, all these imaginations of Rudolf Steiner's and spiritual scientists around the world? Is there a sense of, really? I don't really know. I'm not sure. I'm not saying we should have blind beliefs, but doubt, of course, if Rene Descartes said, I doubt, therefore I think, therefore I am. We always forget the doubting bit beforehand. Or he says, I doubt, therefore I am, which could also be said as I think, therefore I am. Yeah, so doubting is a really positive force within us because it makes us want to understand, but it can also be very laming, as can hatred and fear. And what is it that lies beneath those hardening forces? Can I really come step by step through the help of these forces that are coming in through what I'm calling these sanctuaries of attraction in my soul, to call in the powers, the archetypal powers of the warmth of reason, the warm thinking of Mercury, the light of wisdom of Jupiter, the awakeness of Venus, the peace of Mars, and then this raying upness of the creativity and the rising up of spiritual scientific knowledge into my soul as forces that will come to help balance this left and right coming into us in trying to harden our souls. The picture of this picture here, but Lucifer and Ahriman, and you've got the top and the bottom as well, depicts a little bit of this battle and this balancing being in between, possibly using these forces of attraction. So that's the beginning of my talk. Let's see, where do we go after that? So I've talked a little bit about the four-petaled lotus flower. So if you want to read that, that's in the large chapter on some effects of initiation, right towards the end of that chapter, after you've worked on the 16-petal lotus flower and the 12-petal lotus flower and the 10-petal lotus flower and the 6-petal lotus flower, and then you've built the etheric heart and the etheric skin, and then you've opened up the 8-petal lotus flower, we get to start to work on the 4-petal lotus flower. So now that we've all done that, that's what I'm talking about, is we need to pay attention to really getting to know the mirror of our hardened lower self, so that when we see it, we recognize it. This is possibly the inner work that these 7 roses or these 7 eyes can do. That I know it's an overlay, and it may work for some people, and for others it doesn't work. But then how does this work in the afterlife? So last part of the evening, how does this actually then work after death with these sanctuaries of these centers or sanctuaries of attraction? So let's recap. The spiritual worlds have, with the human being, built these sanctuaries of connection that the ruling will and the ruling wisdom can flow into our etheric body and our physical body in our sleep. We've tried to work a little bit with using the imagination of the 7 roses of the rose cross and the overlay of the Lamb of God symbol that Steiner gave as ways of feeling how we can call upon those planetary qualities to help us look at our own shadow and get it out of the way as a preparation to entering and perceiving the spiritual world. After death, what happens? When our etheric body and our astral body that have possibly built some of these sanctuaries in the astral formation goes into the spiritual world, do they meet? Do these sanctuaries that we've created in sleep meet with what we've carried and transformed in our soul bodies into the spiritual world? And I'd like to just leave you with a last thought that I found was relevant to this, because we're talking about these spheres. And as we know, in the soul lands and in the spirit lands after death, we expand in consciousness. So after the 3 days, we go into the moon sphere, and eventually, after a while of reflecting upon our life and working through things, we are as large as the moon sphere. And then we go to the Mercury and the Venus and the Sun sphere. And then we move from the soul lands into the spirit lands and go through Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. So let's just keep that there. We won't go into the starry worlds tonight, but these are these realms that we have here. And again, a lesser known thought, maybe you know it, but it's not, Rudolf Steiner doesn't speak about this very often, but he talks about our work then, the transformative work that we do as we pass through the various spheres in the realm after death. He says, here on the earth, we are situated at a point on the earth's surface. Our organs are within us, whereas the starry heavens are outside. The opposite is the case after death. Then the human being grows to a cosmic dimension. When we have expanded up to the moon sphere, the spiritual that belongs to the moon becomes an organ within us. So the moon sphere down here it becomes after death what the brain is for us on earth as a physical human being. Each planetary body becomes an organ for us after death, inasmuch as we are expanded to its orbit. The sun becomes a heart. As we bear the physical heart within our body, so there we carry the spiritual part of the sun within us. There is only one difference. We are perfect physical human beings when, after the embryonic evolution, all the organs have formed. They are simultaneously present. After death, we acquire these organs little by little, one after another, like a plant, really. We are in this respect considered externally quite similar to a plant being that also forms its organs successively. We may, for example, compare the organ received on Mars with the lungs and the larynx. And that's it. And we've got to work out the rest. Tell me how. Really, what does Jupiter make? He didn't finish off the work. So those are my thoughts. Does our work with the Rose Cross in developing those inner feelings and taking them in, but then also taking the possibility of the 7 roses, getting rid of them and feeling them as these eyes within us, and drawing in the inner work the support of these beings into the shadow nature of our thinking, feeling, and willing, to help us begin to lift them away from holding us, in our full-time consciousness, prepare us for, being able to work and perceive into the spiritual worlds, but then also come to a sense of fruition in the after-death life when these organs are being built. So the work we do now with these eyes, with these sanctuaries of attraction, possibly help us build these organs. We build a human being from the head down, obviously, brain first, through upwards. There's an upside down human being that we build there. What does that even mean? Has anyone worked with that before, heard about that before? Be interested to know who's got a working knowledge of that, because I don't. And I think it's something for us to consider.
The fact, what is the next incarnation?
Yeah, as
how you relate in that process.
Absolutely. So what we build there then transforms into our spirit germ for the next incarnation as well. Absolutely. So it's quite a critical thing to be able to work with. Thank you. Do we do questions, or do we just say that's enough now?
I'd like to ask a question.
Chris.
And it's thank you so much for extraordinary. Thank you. Your research and the depth that you've brought to us. It's going to be a left field question, if you don't mind.
Yeah. Left body, right body.
Definitely left field. You know, when you were talking, and I'm sorry if it's so different to the content you've brought, but this quest for going to Mars, physically going to Mars, which is something that's going to, you know, take up a lot of energy, money, etc. And yet what you've just given is really a truer picture of what this quest is.
Yeah.
Would you like to comment there?
Look, there's a lot that can be said. My understanding, and I remember this from years ago, that somewhere the good doctor said it would be fine for human beings to go as far as the moon. But if they go beyond that, it will be damaging. I can't substantiate that quote. Do you know anything about that, Wolfgang? No. It was something we learned at some point. On the other side, all of these quests, I think, are spiritual questions. But Steiner calls blind. He says we are blind and under fantasies because we don't hold the spiritual scientific content. I don't even know. I don't know. I didn't bring that book with me this evening. But you know, we're looking for elemental beings. So we see aliens. We're looking for spacecraft. But what we're seeing, I don't know if you know that, but Rudolf Steiner says that the soul of the spirit germ that's incarnating is in the shape of a flying saucer. So when people are seeing flying saucers, are they seeing alien ships, or are they just starting to perceive souls incarnating? And the quest for Mars, this quest to conquer space, I think is an unconscious, materialized, blinded yearning to understand, but thinks it'll get there by meeting the material only. And so there's this huge drive to conquer space because we think we'll find something there, whereas we can if we just look at it, if we look to see what the men on Mars are. And you know, the sort of, so yeah, I think that the quest is real, but it's a sort of materialized, a lost yearning somewhere. That's how I try to understand a lot of these quests for new horizons. And people, I think, do start seeing aliens, and they do start seeing things. But the question is, are they seeing aliens, or are they seeing angels? And you know, angels appear to you like you want them to. They don't appear like the pictures of Botticelli, or you know, I don't know, did Botticelli do angels? But you know what I mean. Yeah, it's not going to be like a traditional angel picture. It'll be our expectation of experience will produce particular images. And there's questions there for me around that. Yeah, yeah. And wanting a material explanation will twist the image. Yeah.
Have to do this work, this is scientific, and it's good.
Yeah.
Not understanding.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Chris.
You mentioned about the repair of the human body as being dangerous or something.
The what?
The repair of the human body during
Mhm.
sleep. There's something that in a meditative state, if I'm able to go into these deep meditative states, I actually feel I'm doing that.
Yeah.
Because I feel something happens to me that is actually far deep. I might wake up a little bit disturbed. You know how you might wake up from sleep, just a little bit tired and a little bit this. But the meditative state actually is able to really do remarkable things to the physical body. Well,
Absolutely.
that's my
Yeah,
experience.
absolutely.
Is that?
Yeah, there's the three sisters:
Yeah.
sleep, meditation, and death.
Mm.
We all go into the spiritual world when we are asleep, when we meditate, and when we die, and they're different ways of accessing it. The thing is that with sleep, the angels are still very active. In death, of course, we are active with the angels, but in meditation, we become active. But we're in kindergarten still, so we need the sleep and the death. If we meditated all the time, we might not need to sleep or die. But there's a lot of error possible with meditation still, and this is the sort of the cutting edge for this, is between what the gods and the angels are still doing for us and what we can begin to do to work towards working constructively with that. I think meditation falls into that realm, and we can experience that definitely, the same inflow. Yeah.
Whenever we take something consciously on, we release those beings who did it before for us.
Yeah.
And you could ask the question, are we
ready to forego our angel? Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. 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 Are we ready to sort of take on that responsibility and the consequence of that? Do we have the capacity to do that yet? Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Two questions. Could it be the opinions could be differently named as dogmas, and maybe they function in religious spheres, but also political, ideological spheres. And judgment is just judging, seeing wrongness and falsity in people, or mostly in others, sometimes in ourselves. That's one. And the second is you unpack the doubt, which is kind of more clear, but hatred and
Fear.
and fear. Yeah, I've been meditating on fear to its depth, but for the hatred, I just don't know where it leads to. So if you have done anything on this side, on this direction, can you tell us?
Yeah, you see, these are these forces of doubt. Doubt we can kind of get better, but hatred and fear we possibly get a bit better as well. But hatred is a very dark emotion. It's a very dark emotion. Even to admit to ourselves, I mean, can I hate? Part of me goes, I don't know that I can hate, but maybe I'm, deluding myself. Maybe I do hate, but it's just so deep down that I'm not prepared to look at it yet. Because it's a very disabling, it's a death blowing emotion, hatred. And we have to have a lot of courage to look at the possibility of real hatred, if we have it. So I can't say more than that, but it might well up in moments where you say, "Oh, I hate that person." It's like,
That's right.
that would be a real pause to go, really? You really hate them, or you're just really cross with them right now? So I know it's not really an answer for you, but Wolfgang.
It's a question whether it is on a personal level or what is meant with the hatred there, because it's a hatred towards the spirit maybe, and it expresses itself in mocking and scorn and this what
lots of things we see on the internet that are, you know, what is kind of feeding, for example, racism. Yeah, it is
Yeah.
it is deep down a feeling. Maybe if I would stand against a human being, I
Yeah.
wouldn't.
Yeah.
I wouldn't confess to it, but
Yeah.
you know,
A real deep antagonistic antipathy
yeah.
that I'm not even prepared to acknowledge properly. Yeah, yeah. It's a very hard one, these. Yeah. It needs an other, yeah. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
starts to, you need a conflict and then the hatred comes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we're often not honest.
Yeah.
When we have maybe a feeling of hatred, we're not conscious of it.
I think we're not conscious of it mostly. Yeah.
Yeah, but when you look at politics, it is used
Yeah.
to
To whip it up. Yeah.
You know, it's used.
Yeah. Absolutely. All of these are the fear of loss of land, all those things. War can be thought into that. But just to the other question, Mishka, all of these words can be used, as I said, as a spectrum. So these are just one word. So opinions, of course, can also be useful. Dogmas can also be useful. A dogma is a very useful bit of knowledge. Steiner says dogma is a spiritual truth that is in a sarcophagal form because we don't understand it anymore. And we need to bring understanding to the dogma to lift it into understanding again. So dogmas are important, but they're one-sided. And you know, judgments can be very good. Sometimes we need to discern what to decide in this crisis, in this situation. We need discernment to be able to make a thought decision. But judgments can also be condemning. You know, so there's the good side and the bad side of all of these things as well, all of these words. So I've just put them there up as archetypes to feel into where I am on that spectrum. You know, some people are more stuck on this side and others more on that side, and some are very balanced. They understand everything.
The good side of anger. I've heard from some Christians what is the good side of anger, but
Yeah.
I would like to hear from you first.
When a mother sees her child run in front of a car, she's going to get angry, and that's love. She gets angry out of love and protection of her offspring. The wrath of God is God's love being expressed at his disappointment in our inability to be, you know, humane. So anger can be useful, but in the mission of anger, Steiner calls it, it's a poison. Anger is a poison that is put into our sentient soul to help us turn it into love. If we can't, out of our ego, transform our sentient soul, anger is given to us as a poison, like a medicine. Hopefully we don't die from it and go into hatred. The magenta. Yeah. Yeah. And in the large cupola of the Goetheanum, right in the center is the picture of God, and it's called the wrath of God, which is love. So wrath and love are very, very deeply connected.
I just wanted to clarify a sort of a baby understanding of the overlay. So the work of the Rose Cross meditation, when you get to the dropping into the inner work, what you're calling the mystical part of it, are there particular places for each of the 7 roses inwardly in relation to the human form, which then have an existing connection to the particular planets? Is that one of the overlays?
That's one of the overlays, yes.
Okay. And so you're calling those, he called them what, centers of attraction? You're saying sanctuaries? No.
The centers of attraction that Steiner speaks about are in the spiritual world where we sleep.
Okay.
And my question is, can we use the 7 points in the body, which is the left of the head, the right of the head, the left of the left hand, the right hand, the left foot, the right foot, as places where we can build forces from the planets to help us work with the balancing of these, that's the overlay. So this is the overlay over the 7 roses. Yeah, that's my overlay, not Steiner's overlay.
Yeah, okay. And so just when the part of it being attraction, is that meaning that by doing that kind of work, because those positions have a relationship to those particular planets,
Yeah.
then it can be a place to attract those beings to come and help form and shape and guide? Is that what you mean?
That's what
in those aspects of the soul?
And because of these eyes, what
Yeah.
I am experiencing is that if I say have an eye on the right-hand side of my head that is there to bring in the light of Jupiter, the forces of Jupiter can be attracted to help me look into my soul and to look into the hardened shadow self.
This is then the 4-petaled lotus flower work that you were talking about as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's sort of gone from the rose cross feeling bliss into some real hard work through this as an overlay. But these eyes would be, if you wanted to, you place them on your body. And the question would be, are they just imaginary or are they actual? If we keep drawing those forces in, do they become structures in the astral body through the sleep work? So these centers of attraction in the spiritual world and what I'm doing in my astral body may become actual eyes for us to look into ourselves deeper, but with the help of these forces of will and wisdom that then transform in our post-life experience
and become part of the forming of organs in the body for the next life. Okay.
That's
okay.
the working
I've got a
theory.
basic
That's the working
picture.
theory.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, for instance, thank you. The sun, it's really well known, the sun is an organ which helps the heart, and you can say Mars with iron and so on. And Faye would know a lot more about this through the medical work. The medicines, the anthroposophical medicines, which come from those planets, and then further on, can I extrapolate the work of biodynamics using those planets?
Exactly.
Imagine the food being grown with the preparations and the compost
Under those influences,
in those influences, and why we do things at certain times. Therefore, the food you eat has already done a lot of the work for you.
It supports it as well. Absolutely, yes. Absolutely, yeah. So I mean that is ongoing. I mean the overlay of the 7 is ongoing through everything, obviously. Yeah. What Diane was saying was that there's the planetary work in the medicines and the biodynamic crop growing, where the influences of the planets are brought into the medicine and the food, which then support the planetary processes in the body to and do part of the work. Yeah. Yeah. Woven together, yeah.
I think it's good to transpose it onto the body. I like that concept.
Yeah.
And the key, it seems to really gel with me.
Yeah.
How I experience
the key was this meditation with these streamings on the body going, hang on a second. If I put all that together, I come up with AB's, a bit more than I should maybe. But yeah, it works for me too. Yeah. Barbara.
Yeah, I was going to say thank you very much for the picture, because when we did this exercise as Carla's course, and I was just going to say it's good to look at it intellectually, but then to get a really good grip on it, to actually do the meditation. And you bringing this has given me a lot more clarification, because I always thought, well, why 7 roses? Like there must be something behind that. And he doesn't actually say much about that. And so my experience with actually doing it, I actually can see it depends on the individual. Like you might be going through something that perhaps maybe is relating to anger, and the meditation allows you to go into that deeply. You probably won't be able to do all 7 at the same time. But unless you do the meditation regularly,
You don't have the resources.
You're not going to touch each one, which is like a gift of to break through whatever the issue is.
Absolutely. It's
So-
a bit like, the 6 subsidiary exercises. The control of, the equanimity of feeling is not about equanimity of feeling. It's about when I get angry, can I control my feelings? It's the same thing. It's this, if I keep practicing building these places to draw upon those, when I do get angry, I can call upon Venus to, and allow that to get me into a deeper understanding of the why the anger, and therefore maybe transform it. Yeah. So we're building capacity as well. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I'm done.
And again with the words and then the sounds. Heilsam ist nur, wenn im Spiegel der Menschenseele sich bildet die ganze Gemeinschaft und in der Gemeinschaft lebet der Einzelseele Kraft. The healthy social life is found when in the mirror of each human soul the whole community finds its reflection, and when in the community the virtue of each one is living.
Just like to say 2 more things. Second half of the lecture. Sorry, Wolfgang. This lecture may be more than you can hold in your memory. So it has been recorded and it will be on my YouTube channel in a few days' time. It's under the name of Jude Neeme-Samson, which is my name. And next week, I give a second lecture on what happens at Christmas, which will proceed from what we've done tonight. It won't be dependent on this lecture, but this is a kind of a good foundation to understand what we do there next Tuesday night. So join us again.
Because I played a Christmas song.
Yeah, I heard that. Prelude. Thank you. Yeah.
I'd like
Thank
to-
you.
Sorry.
Yep. Sorry.